Welcome to A1TV, another guest, another evening of entertainment with a sports star from the local area, northern suburbs of Melbourne in the Broadmeadows, Jacana, Glenroy area. And I'm speaking to the 1992 Brownlow medalist from the Western Bulldogs or Footscray Footy Club back then, Scott Wynd. Welcome to A1TV, The Mark Show.
Morning, Mark. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad at all. The reason I wanted to get you on is because you are a northern suburbs boy and you made really well of what you've done. And we'll talk about your career, what you're doing today. But what do you remember of your formative years growing up in the Jacana area and playing at Jacana Football Club?
Jacana was my main club in the junior years, but I actually spent some time in Sydney as well. So I was up there playing a couple seasons up there as a 10 and 11-year-old, and then come back to Jacana after playing under 9s there, come back to Jacana under 11s and spent most of the time at Jacana with a little bit at West Meadows. Fortunately, back in those days, from time to time, clubs would struggle to fill sides, and Jacana went through that stage. But juniors it's what you live for every Sunday, to go out there and play. It was great, Jacana. It was a pretty windy place. Always remember that. And a fair bit of mud around the local areas too. There was some shocking grounds back in the early 80s, but a lot of fun. The jumpers were interesting, the old purple and gold, but that's who we were. And I still consider myself a Jacana boy at heart.
And your dad played some games of footy at Melbourne back in the 60s, I think it was. And did you show ability, or did you think to yourself, I can go higher with my football at the early age?
Back in the 80s, a sport-loving boy would either want to play cricket for Australia or play football for whoever they supported. And I was a St Kilda fan, so loved Trevor Barker and the Cunninghams back then, and even Plugger Lockett. As I got older and Plugger came along, was my hero. And early years, I was tall, reasonably athletic, but then ran into a few injuries, surprise, surprise. So probably from the age of 12 to 16, I only had one full season. So whether it was ankle, had to sit out a full season because of ankle growing problems. I did 2 dislocated kneecaps during that period as well, broken arm, tore a thigh. Just couldn't get any consistent footy probably until I was about 17. And I was at Jacana playing under 18s there. And that's where I got noticed by a few clubs, including the Bulldogs. I was zoned to North Melbourne, the zone days of the 80s. So did a few under 15 training tryouts, I suppose. Never got too far, got past a couple of levels, but couldn't crack it in the 19s or their Teal Cup, as they used to be called then, or the under 15s. But again, I had so many injuries, the inconsistent football, and probably a little bit tall and gangly at the time, didn't really work. So the way the rules were, after I had a good season at Jacana in 87, which is when I was 17, bottom age 18 player, got noticed by a few clubs playing a bit of rep footy. And at the time back then, if you zoned to a club and you turned 18, you actually became a free agent. That's I just had opportunities, not just with North Melbourne, a couple of others, including the Bulldogs. And in all honesty, I saw a better opportunity at the Bulldogs. They just lost Andrew Purser in 1987. He'd gone back to Perth. He was their key ruckman for many years and didn't really have anyone else. And that's where I saw the opportunity.
Who was the catalyst that really put some time to you that so much so as, you had, I think it was around a 12-year career at the Footscray Western Bulldogs, but who was the one person that when you got there, took you under their wing and made you the footballer you were because you had a great career?
I don't think there was any one person. I mean, when I first got to the club playing seconds, in all honesty, I was just happy to be there. Every kid's dream who loves VFL at the time or AFL now was just to play that one game. So to come down after only playing junior football, never playing against men before, and to walk into the seconds at the Bulldogs and have guys like Simon Atkins, Steve McPherson running around. Brian Cordy was our captain. We were lucky enough to win the flag in the first year in the twos. Some pretty good players coming through, like Libba as well. At the time, Mick Malthouse was a big influence. I only had 1 year in the twos and 1 year in the season in the seniors under Mick, and the perception of the time of Mick being a hard ass and very, very tough to deal with is just far from the truth. He is, for the younger guys, he is a very, very good teacher, and that's why he's had the success he has, because he's a great coach, but he's very good in nurturing talent as well. And he was fantastic early. Then when he left, we had Terry Wheeler, and probably Terry Wheeler was the person who sort of moulded my career in regards to being that defensive ruckman, playing in the back line, kick behind the play, trying to clog up the forward line a little bit. But also he helped me, I suppose, develop good relationships with my midfielders, and got us to socialise a fair bit and just be around each other and have that connection. As I said, Simon Atkins, Libber, Scott West in the future, leading it onwards as well. So Wheels had a big influence in my sort of early 20s. And then we had Gary Dempsey, who was my ruck coach for my whole career, apart from the first year or two. And Demps was probably in my early years, my hardest opponent, because he hated getting beaten, still thought he could play AFL at 50. And it would be a fair battle when we do our little ruck work on Tuesday or Thursday nights. And he was great. He just taught me about the game, understanding my abilities and what I needed to do to I suppose, to take hold of being a ruckman and being the leader amongst the team. And Demps was a very good technician as well. As I said, he was very good at showing me a few little different things that I hopefully took on board and developed as my career went on as well.
Did you evolve as a football? Because it's an amazing story, I think, Scott. All the injuries you had as a junior, as a kid, to go to the club in 1998 and then win the Brownlow and Charles Sutton Medal in 1992. So for 4 years from when you started, under Gary Dempsey was your teacher, to win a Brownlow medal, your transition with football, or your maturity as a footballer, went twofold. You must have been pinching yourself, or did you feel you had a really good season in 92?
It was crazy. I mean, we went from a club who was extinct at the end of '89. I was pretty confident when the merger was happening, or the takeover, whichever way you want to look at it, with Fitzroy, that I had an opportunity at Fitzroy. So for me, I thought, okay, well, I'll just got to roll with the punches here. I just wanted to play football. Then when the Bulldogs were saved, with Peter Gordon and Terry Wheeler taking control, I suppose that's when my career sort of started to blossom a little bit. 1990 was a bit slow. I had glandular fever at the start of the year, and probably played about 14, 15 games, I think it was. Just never built momentum. But after that, had a really good pre-season. And back in the my early 20s, I was reasonably athletic, reasonable runner. And 91 and 92, I finished second in the best and fairest behind Libber in 91. And then 92 just rolled into it, it seemed. And you were playing in a really good side. We had success. It was so much fun to have success. The 92 was sitting on the top of the ladder, or second for most of the season, and to be playing good footy at the same time, it was really enjoyable. I look back now as the late 90s, where we had our success as well, with a few prelims and things like that. That was, of course, you're a bit older, that was a bit more like work and hard work. Whereas early 90s, early 20s, it was just great fun to be out there running around, having success, which the Bulldogs hadn't had since probably 85 when they made the prelim. It was just really enjoyable. My form went along with the team's form. I was lucky enough to be playing good footy at that time too.
Do you remember the night of the Brownlow, and what you were thinking when you're on the night, thinking, that's going along through the count, and then all of a sudden you're getting towards the end and thinking, no, this can't be right. How were you feeling the night of the Brownlow? I've never spoken to a Brownlow medalist before, so I'm a bit excited about that.
I can remember sitting at the time at my girlfriend's place in 1990 watching Libber win it. And as a 20-year-old, I just had a tear in my eye, and I think, wouldn't it be great to go to the Brownlow? Just to, not to win it, just to go to the Brownlow. It'd just be such a dream. And a year later, 91, I went. And then 92, I was actually favourite, but I didn't feel like I was a favourite. There's plenty of other players who had really, really solid, good seasons. Mickey McGuire, Dunstall, Stuart Lowe, guys like that. And I was favourite going there. I drove with my wife. Well, not wife at the time, but wife-to-be. Drove there, just walked in just to enjoy the night. Thought I'd get some votes, but never ever thought that I'd win it. And to the point where when I did get up on stage to accept it, I was just petrified, absolutely petrified. I just said to myself, I'm walking up the stage, don't fall over walking up the steps. And I've only ever seen the interview once. I was pretty average. I was that nervous and petrified of being up there and accepting an award that, you don't ever dream of getting, because, it is the pinnacle, individual pinnacle of our game. And it wasn't until afterwards, I suppose, I relaxed a little bit, did a few interviews afterwards, that I actually could enjoy it. But up till then, I was panicking and shitting myself, basically.
I was just going through your career, right? And 94, you only played 9 games, but the rest of you, 95 through 2000, you were pretty consistent with your fitness and getting through games. So that must have been a pretty much a fill-up in your career, because you actually had all those injuries early on, but you're able to play, obviously, majority of the football as you went on in your footy.
Yeah, look, I think the early 90s, playing one out in the ruck for many, many years in a row, it impacts on your body. And it did with myself. I got to 94, 24 years old, and actually tore my patella tendon early in the season. And it took me 2 years to get it right, because by right I should have had an op, got it fixed. But with the help of a couple of our doctors, I think it was probably 2 years of football where I didn't play without an injection into the patella tendon to actually allow me to play. And patella tendon injuries are jumper's knee. So all of a sudden I went from a guy who could jump reasonably well to a guy who had to change his game to use his body a bit more and be a little bit smarter. No drop zones with our players. It's not just about getting up there and hitting it forward and hoping your guys run on to it. It was more about dropping it to specific areas. And 94 was, it was hard because that was my first year as captain as well. And that was frustrating because I just couldn't get the body right. But I learned to adapt to the I suppose carrying injuries, and while it may have slowed me down a fair bit, it still allowed me to play by dealing with a few of these injuries with whether it was some injections or whether it was just remodeling my game a little bit. The consistency in my last 4 or 5 years was great. I think I played 20 to 24 games each year, which for an injury-prone person was fantastic.
History of the Western Bulldogs, Footscray, Charlie Sutton was a superstar, Doug Hawkins, Simon Atkins, you mentioned him, but to captain the club from 94 to 2000, that's a big privilege to captain any side. But an AFL side, that you must have been pretty happy with that part of your footy career.
Yeah, again, you don't go to a club. You go to a club, well, I did, to try and play one game and then try and play 50 games so you get a banner. And then trying to play 100 games so you get up on the locker, your name in the locker. And once you get that name in the locker, you feel like you've had a really solid career. To be named captain in 94, I wasn't ready for it. I didn't see myself as a leader, and that took me a couple of years to adjust to that. Now, I'm a big believer, if you don't see yourself as a leader, other people don't see yourself as a leader either. So it took me a while to adjust. Having a few injuries during that time was also frustrating. But once I realised what I needed to do as a leader, it wasn't about being the best player and getting your name in the best. It was about being the best leader in the team. And that's something I prided myself on sort of in the second half of my career. And in all honesty, I told people this, that as a team game, which football is, I actually rate being captain of the Bulldogs, I think for 7 years, higher than winning the Brownlow, because it means so much to me. I think when I retired, I think I was the second longest serving captain behind the great E.J. Whitten. I'm not quite sure if Jono or Granny has beaten that, or the Bont will probably do that. He'll easily get past myself. But to captain that side for 139 games, I think it was, off the top of my head, and to be the second longest behind EJ is something I'm very proud of.
How many coaches you have in your time? You've mentioned Mick, but how many others were there?
Mick for the first couple of years, one as a reserve player under Rod Curley-Austin. Then Terry took over. Terry Wheeler had Alan Joyce there for about 3 years, and then Terry Wallace. So for 13 years, that's pretty stable for the Bulldogs, isn't it? I mean, early 80s and 70s, they were changing every 12 to 24 months. So 4 coaches in 13 years, that's not bad.
All different, Scott? All different types of coaches in that mix?
Yeah, very much. I mean, Mick, as I said before, I would have loved to have Mick coach me a bit longer. Not just the one season of just finding my feet in the AFL or VFL level at the time. Terry Wheeler probably allowed me to do and have the success I had and help the team by the way I played. But Terry was a coach before his time. He was a teacher, and that's the way he coached. He was an educator. But what he also was very good at was educating our team on the history of the club. Like up until then, Footscray to me. I didn't know the great past players, the John Schultz, everyone knows EJ, but the Alan Hopkins, all these guys who were part of our history. So Wheels is very good at that. I think he's very unlucky to get the boot when he did. We went from playing in the prelim in 92, just missing out in the finals in 93, and 2 games in the 94, he was out the door. I think that was a pretty harsh call. Joycey took over from then, and Joycey probably did come from a club Hawthorn, who just had success. Great players running around in every position. Bulldogs were probably rebuilding at that time. While we made a couple of finals, we were probably still long way off the mark. And in 96, halfway through the season, Joycey stepped down and Terry Wallace took over. And I think that was a really good change for the club. Terry took us to a new level of professionalism. He trained the arse off us, including myself, and set a standard. And, we went from being second last in 96, just in front of Fitzroy, who got kicked out of the competition, to being a kick away from making the grand final in 97. And that player was an innovator. All the sides you see running around on the ground at the moment prior to the game is all because of Terry Wallace. the flood. Probably Terry's got to take the blame for that as well. But he was a very, very smart coach. Very smart coach.
I've got one last one. I want to move on to your career post football, because that's a really important part of the story. But I'll ask you one last footy one. Who was the hardest opponent you played against?
It varied because of the different players. I mean, as I got older and maybe wiser or maybe dumber, I don't know. You had to adjust your game depending on who you're playing. So earlier on, you just go out and you just run and jump as high as you can and run around, chase the ball around. But as you got older, you realise that you come up against different opponents. Earlier on, it was the Maddens. Always, Justin was just so tall, or felt so tall and gangly, and whereas Simon was just a technician with the way he was able to use his body to protect the drop of the ball. So those guys early on in my career, and I probably learned a fair bit from Simon, because that's what I probably modelled my second half of my career on, with the way I rucked. But then you'd come against the guys like a Jeff White or a Matthew Clark from Brisbane or in Adelaide. That those guys just had huge leaps. And from a guy who had lost his leap, I had to figure out ways to combat them. Then you play on a Jimmy Steins, who the bugger would run around like a rover all day, and you have to figure out that I can't catch him, so I've just got to be a bit smarter and win the ball ups and boundary throw in, so I didn't have to chase the bugger, and he had to run back. So there was just so many different players that you just adjusted each week. You had to. Big Monkey, I was always happy that he didn't belt me each week. That was the main thing. So I always, my tactic against him was just be nice to him. That way he wouldn't belt me. They just varied depending on what abilities they had during my career that I had to combat, I suppose.
I reckon it's about 15 years since I've seen you. And the last time I spoke to you were into, now correct me if I'm wrong here, was into rubbish or waste management or something in that field. Are you still doing something around that? And what actually are you doing at the moment?
Yes, I'm involved in waste management, just like the Sopranos, Stoney. Okay. So myself and Glenn Coleman, ex-teammate of mine, was with, obviously Footscray Sydney and the Bulldogs. He got me into the industry in 95, with the waste industry, with one of the big guys at the time. Did my apprenticeship there, worked with Glenn. And then 2002, Glenn and I had a crack at ourselves. We started a business called Suburban Waste, had that for 4 years, built that up, and got tempted by the devil. Someone came along and offered us a good price. And then we stayed out of it for 2 years. And then we kicked off another one called Superior Waste. So we've had Superior Waste in Melbourne for about 13 and a half years now. So a long time to be talking rubbish, Stoney.
Well, someone's got to do it, Scott, let me tell you.
Yeah. There's always rubbish. There's always rubbish. I just want the good rubbish, that's all. Just give me the good stuff.
And I suppose rubbish goes in many different aspects, or, we talk about recycling, but rubbish comes in all different shapes and sizes. So I'm sure there's a lot of technical parts of it, of the business, that go in different directions.
No, it's not. Just put your rubbish in the bin. We'll come and pick it up for you. Okay. It's not, I keep telling a lot of our clients, it's not rocket science. So just you create it and we'll pick it up for you.
All right, very good. So the last one's about your family. So you had children, and do they show any sporting ability at this moment?
No, they're a bit too smart to play too much sport, Stoney. They're lucky enough to take a lot after their mother. So I went the opposite to Scott West. Scott West had 4 boys. I've got 4 girls. Having had kids reasonably young, I had my first one at 22, the second one at 25. So they grew up on the football, with football running through their veins, going to the footy each week and going to the creche and mixing with the Tom Liberatores and the Mitch Wallace and all that sort of stuff. And they love their footy, but the oldest one, Ashley, is now involved in our business. So she's out talking rubbish to people, and she's a lot better looking and a lot smarter than me. And Jessica's a teacher, primary school teacher. And then the 2 younger ones, I've got a 20-year-old and a 15-year-old. They're heavily into their basketball. So the 20-year-old plays Big V basketball, which is sort of the Melbourne state competition, I suppose, for women. So she's playing that. And the younger one, if you know basketball, she's playing Vic Champ basketball and under 16s for Keilor. So those 2 girls love their basketball. All 4 of them love their footy, but again, they're smart enough just to enjoy watching it and don't try and play it, I suppose.
Are they all Bulldog supporters, Scott?
100%. They wouldn't be allowed to live in the house, mate, unless they were. That was the rules from the start.
Now, last one, do you actually still connect with your old teammates and catch up with them time to time?
Not in the last couple of years.
No, not last. No.
It's hard enough to catch up with family, let alone anyone else.
True.
Yeah, it's been 20 years since I finished. I was at 14, 15 years since I stopped doing ruck coaching at the Bulldogs. So that connection's sort of moved on. You still run into people from time to time. I still talk to Scott West a fair bit. I see Colinook, Libba's always, he's got his own business there, so he drives around, looks for my bins to see if he can find some Bulldog supporters with my bins on site. Paul DiMartina, obviously Glenn Coleman, I'm very, very close with, and probably Jose Ramiro, who we still do a few projects together. Jose's into the building and developments, and I'm happy to jump on his bandwagon from time to time when he finds a nice little development there. But I played footy with Jose at Chicana for a couple of years there. He's a year younger than me, but they're probably the guys who I still stay in contact. You still talk to the Matthew Cross or the Luke Darcy's from time to time, but it's hard to get that opportunity to catch up now. And that's when the Bulldogs did win the flag in 2016. They had a presentation afterwards, and I was lucky enough to get an invite with a lot of other players. And you were seeing the guys like Todd Curley, Brad Weir, Danny Southern from Perth, Darren Davies, who I played my first couple of years with, hadn't seen him in 25 plus years. Ran into him there, and just some other guys. That was a great opportunity for the past players to catch up and share in the success of the 2016 side. So it's always good when you do catch up, but unfortunately it's not as often as everyone would like it to be.
They've got a good chance this year too, the Bulldogs, Scott. I reckon that they've got the team. If they're in the right place at the right time, they could nearly do some damage up there, up the top.
Yeah, I think their midfield's elite. And that's obviously key with most sides trying to have a crack at the flag. Their forward line seems to be functioning really well. They're kicking scores, where that's been maybe a bit of a problem in the past. And the back line's just got to get a little bit settled. There's been guys, especially the three talls, going in and out all year. Getting a little bit of stability over the next 4 weeks would be great. But in all honesty, Stoney, I think it's so open. I really think it's going to come down to getting home finals. The Bulldogs under Bevo have never finished top four. So this is their opportunity to get a home final and not have to go maybe interstate twice. So I think there's some good sides out there. I think it's pretty even, and it's who's going to have the less injuries and the good form going in the last 4 weeks of the year. But cross fingers, like all Bulldog supporters, I'd love to see a little bit more success and add to that premierships.
Scott Wynd, thanks for joining on A1TV, the Mark Show. Been great having a chat, reminiscing about your career and your time in the Chicana region and Broadmeadows, and obviously finishing up with the Bulldogs and the Brownlow Medal. Thanks for joining me, mate, and I really appreciate the chat, and good luck with the waste.
No worries. I'll just remember, if I knock on your door, we'll look after you, okay? But thanks, Tony. Have a great day. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Bye, pal.